What if I told you that a simple hand gesture, one you've probably seen before, was a life or death cry for help? That's exactly what happened at a quiet roadside diner where a Marine noticed something that no one else did. Would you have spotted it? Imagine this, a lonely highway rest stop, the kind where most people only stop for a quick snack or a cup of coffee. Nothing out of the ordinary. But for one Marine, what he noticed in that diner changed everything. A young girl, sitting across from a much older man, made a small, barely noticeable gesture that sent chills down his spine. And it saved her life. This story will remind you why trusting your gut instinct might just be the most important thing you ever do. Stick around, because this one will make you think twice about what you see around you every day. It was just a regular afternoon for Michael Winston, a Marine who had recently returned home after years of service overseas. He was driving along Highway 27, heading back to his hometown, when he decided to pull over at the Ember Field rest stop. It wasn't anything special, just one of those small, forgotten places on the side of the road with a diner and a couple of vending machines. But for Michael, it was perfect for a quick coffee break before continuing his journey. As he walked into the diner, he immediately took in the atmosphere. A few truckers hunched over their cups of coffee, an elderly couple sharing a slice of pie, and the hum of fluorescent lights filling the space. It was quiet. Too quiet, almost. Michael's military training had taught him to always stay alert, to constantly scan his surroundings, even in the most mundane settings. And that's exactly what he did. His eyes moved across the room, lingering on each person for just a moment, until they landed on something that didn't sit right. In a booth by the window sat a young girl, no older than 8 or 9. She was small, with dark skin, her curly hair framing her face in a way that made her seem even more delicate. Across from her was a man, older, probably in his 50s, with neatly combed salt and pepper hair and a crisp navy suit. He looked polished, respectable even. But there was something off about the whole scene. The girl's body language was all wrong. She wasn't fidgeting like most kids her age would in a diner. Instead, she sat stiff, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes darting around the room like she was trying to find an escape. And the man? He barely looked at her, hiding behind his newspaper, though Michael noticed the quick, sharp glances he kept sending in her direction. Michael's instincts were screaming at him, telling him that something wasn't right. But he couldn't just jump to conclusions. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the man was just a tired father and the girl was shy. Maybe they were having a quiet meal before getting back on the road. Michael told himself to relax, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That's when he saw it. The small hand gesture. The girl raised her hand slightly, palm out, fingers spread wide. It was quick, so subtle that most people wouldn't have noticed, but Michael did. His heart skipped a beat because he had seen that exact gesture before. In his military training, they had learned about non-verbal distress signals, and this was one of them. It wasn't an accident. This girl was silently asking for help. In that moment, everything changed for Michael. His casual coffee break was over. He couldn't just sit there and do nothing. But he also couldn't storm over to the table and accuse the man of something without being sure. After all, he had no real proof that the girl was in danger. He had to be smart about this, observe, gather information, and most importantly, make sure he didn't put the girl at greater risk. Michael's mind raced as he tried to figure out the best approach. He could call the police, but if the man saw him doing that, things could spiral out of control. He didn't want to alarm the man, not yet. So he decided to do what he did best. Stay calm, keep a low profile, and gather more intel. He moved to a table closer to the pair, pretending to be interested in the vending machines nearby. From there, he could watch them more closely without drawing too much attention. The girl was still sitting stiffly, her hands now clutched together in her lap, her knuckles turning white. She kept glancing up at the man across from her, but every time she did, she quickly looked away, like she was afraid he'd catch her staring. The man, on the other hand, was playing it cool. Too cool. He barely acknowledged the girl, hiding behind his newspaper, sipping his coffee like they had all the time in the world. But Michael could tell that every move the girl made was being tracked by him, even if he wasn't openly staring at her. It was subtle, but there was an underlying tension in the way the man held himself, like he was ready to act if anything went wrong. Michael had seen that kind of tension before, on the battlefield, in dangerous situations where every move had to be calculated. This wasn't a normal family meal. The girl was scared, and the man was controlling the situation. But how could Michael confirm that? He didn't want to make a scene unless he was absolutely sure. As he watched, he noticed the girl's hands trembling slightly. She was fidgeting with her dress, twisting the fabric between her fingers, but trying hard to keep still. And then, for the second time, she made the hand gesture. Palm out, fingers spread. This time, she held it just a little longer, almost as if she was hoping someone would notice. Michael's pulse quickened. There was no doubt in his mind now. This girl was trying to tell him something, and it was up to him to figure out how to help her without making the situation worse. The first thing he did was look for an escape route. If things went south, he needed to be ready. He scanned the diner quickly. There were 2 exits, one by the front and another near the bathrooms in the back. If it came down to it, he could grab the girl and get out through either one. But he hoped it wouldn't come to that. He considered his options carefully. He could walk over and confront the man directly, but that could cause the situation to explode. If the man was dangerous, he might try to grab the girl and make a run for it. Or worse, he could get violent. Michael couldn't risk that. He needed to approach this carefully, with the element of surprise on his side. So, he made a decision. He'd go over and talk to the girl, not aggressively, not in a way that would alarm the man, but just casually, as if he was making small talk. If the girl responded in a way that confirmed his suspicions, he'd know for sure what he needed to do. Michael stood up, heart pounding in his chest, and walked toward their table. As he got closer, he could feel the man's eyes on him, though the man didn't lower his newspaper. Michael crouched down next to the girl and smiled, trying to seem as non-threatening as possible. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked quietly. The girl froze. Her eyes widened, and for a split second she glanced at the man, fear flickering across her face. Then, just as quickly, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, but her voice was shaky, and the way she said it didn't sit right with Michael. It was all he needed to hear. She was afraid to speak the truth. Michael stood up and gave the man a nod, trying to play it off like nothing was wrong. The man lowered his newspaper slightly, just enough to look Michael in the eyes, but didn't say a word. Michael turned and walked out of the diner, his mind racing. He needed to act, and fast. As soon as he was outside, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "I need to report a possible child abduction," he said, his voice low but urgent. He quickly gave the operator the details, the location, a description of the man and the girl, and the fact that he had seen the girl give a distress signal. The operator assured him that police were on their way, but in the meantime, Michael couldn't just stand by and wait. He positioned himself outside the diner, where he had a clear view of the entrance. His military training kicked in, and he started running through all the possible scenarios in his head. If the man tried to leave with the girl before the police arrived, Michael would have to stop him. He didn't know how dangerous the man was, but he was prepared to intervene if necessary. Minutes felt like hours as Michael stood there, watching the diner's entrance like a hawk. Finally, he heard the sound of sirens in the distance. His heart pounded in his chest as 2 police cars pulled into the rest stop, their lights flashing. The officers wasted no time. They entered the diner, and Michael watched through the window as the scene inside unfolded. The man looked up in surprise as the officers approached him, and for the first time, real fear crossed his face. He grabbed the girl's arm, pulling her toward the door, but the officers were faster. They stepped in, separating the man from the girl and asking him to let go. The man protested, but the officers weren't having it. They calmly but firmly escorted him out of the diner, placing him in handcuffs as the girl stood by, visibly shaken but safe. As it turned out, the man had no right to be with the girl at all. He wasn't her father. He wasn't even related to her. He had taken her, and if Michael hadn't noticed the girl's silent plea for help, she might have been gone forever. Thanks to Michael's quick thinking and his ability to read the situation, the girl was saved, and the man was arrested before he could do any more harm. This story isn't just about a Marine acting on his instincts. It's about the power of paying attention. It's about the importance of noticing the small details, of listening to that gut feeling that tells you something's wrong. Because sometimes, a simple hand gesture could be the difference between life and death. If this story inspired you, don't miss the next one. Like and subscribe.